Today's podcast is brought to you by Progresso Talent Partners, who for more than 25 years have successfully delivered interim and permanent leadership talent to transform businesses. To hire the talent you need to enable your business to thrive, visit www.progressotalent.com today. Jamie Milroy is CEO and founder of Dash Rides, the e-bike subscription platform on a mission to transform the way the world moves for good. He's also an investor and former advisor to Pan Ice, one of the UK's fastest growing ice cream brands. So what's the story behind the story? Without further ado, let's get into it. Jamie Milroy, welcome to Extrology. Great to have you as my guest here, and really looking forward to finding out not only a lot more about Dash Rides, but I think equally a lot more about you and career to date. But I think this morning it would be great if we could just dive straight into Dash Rides. So tell us, let's start by saying, what is Dash Rides?
So very simply, we're an e-bike subscription business. So you pay a monthly fee. And for that, you get not only a great bike from a choice of manufacturers like Brompton, Cowboy, Van Moof, a handful of others, but everything else you need to get cycling. So your helmet, your lock, insurance, anything goes wrong, we'll pay to get it fixed. And then we carbon offset all of our bikes by 400%. So no one can sort of wag their finger at you for riding an e-bike and claim to have some sort of moral high ground over you. So that's what we do. But the reason for doing it is both my co-founder and I passionately believe that we need to encourage more people to take up cycling. We think overwhelmingly an e-bike is the easiest way to do that, but they're very expensive. So this is our sort of way of getting people in there, letting them, commit for as little as a month and just give it a try. Because from first-hand experience living in London, there is honestly no better way to get around in terms of time, value for money, enjoyment, health, you name it. So that's really what we're trying to do. And
to your point, environmental impact.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, absolutely.
Where did the idea stem from? What was the inspiration behind Dash?
So the inspiration, it was, we didn't really have like this light bulb moment that lots of people talk about. What happened is been very gradual evolution, trying and testing lots of things. But the initial thing was I was at PwC. I liked it there, but sort of never saw myself becoming a partner. I was also seeing sustainability come more and more to the fore across my client base. So I'd go to boardrooms and we'd be talking about financial statements, and sustainability would crop up, and it was cropping up more and more often. So I thought there's obviously some underlying trend here that's really gathering momentum. And then in a very chance meeting, I saw how much the firm was spending on moving its people around London on, tubes, taxis, you name it. I mean, it was millions of pounds. And it just struck me as that's, a huge waste of money. And it's not, I know from personal experience, it's really not the quickest way. So there must be a better way of doing it. So that was sort of the underlying sort of set of circumstances that I sort of found myself with. And it's just sort of grown from there, really thinking, right, how do we change this? How do we make it as efficient as possible? How do we get more people to sort of to engage with it and do it? And that's sort of the underlying thing that's just sort of driven everything that we've done to date.
You mentioned there, you were seeing sustainability crop up more and more as an issue, I guess, around boardroom tables. But in what sense? So as a headline, we kind of there is a sense of what people will imagine sustainability is, but how that's represented from a corporate perspective, I guess, different depending on the industry, for example. But how are you seeing it play out in boardrooms as an issue? So
we were seeing it, I would say, from the sort of slightly mercenary side as opposed to the philanthropic.
Yep.
Which is, I think, is actually a good thing, right? I don't think it doesn't matter how you look at it, right? Someone's talking about it's a good thing, but we were seeing it from the perspective of people entering the workforce. It was becoming a real issue for them. And if it's a real issue for your people, it's going to become an issue for you. So if you want to attract the best people, if you want to retain them, if you want to keep them motivated, you've got to sort of listen to what they're saying. Customers, like customer buying behavior and patterns and things like that, people are becoming more and more aware of, how things are sourced, what the environmental impact is, what the social impact. So there's all these sorts of things. And then thinking about, what's the impact of not doing something, given that this is the sort of macro trend that all our employees and our consumers are sort of putting onto us. So that's sort of where I thought, right, okay, well, the younger generations are sort of really concerned about this. That's where the growth is, frankly. So let's do something about it.
And you get a sense now that, I don't know if you're familiar with promoting other podcasts, but the rest is politics with Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart, brilliant podcast, and they're doing a series, leading series, and they had a lady called Jane Rayworth, I think, who wrote Donut Economics, talking about, which is her really what she's talking about is this sense of, I'm going to butcher her premise now, but nonetheless, it was around this sense of, right, so the whole kind of economic mantra that we've grown up to believe is grow, politically, economically, commercially. It's all about growth, right? And I absolutely understand that, no government minister is going to be the one that wants to stand up and say, okay, so for our next, our manifesto includes not growing. But what she's saying is that is destroying, that we cannot, with the 7 billion people of us on this planet, we cannot continue to consume. We're basically eating ourselves alive, for want of a better expression. And my sense is there's more and more of that voice is starting to feed its way through, and much of which is I believe it's a generational thing. There's a real, we're very fortunate that that younger people are very aware as to the implications of what we're doing to the planet and how we need to change behaviours to prevent the doomsday scenario that many predict. Is that something that you're seeing as well? There is the sort of the profit, how people are balancing out the profit motive and employment versus, like, we've got to do good, right? We can't keep growing when we're kind of eating ourselves alive.
Yeah, so I think you've sort of touched on it. So one of the things I think about quite a lot, actually. So sustainability is it boils down to efficiency at the end of the day, is the first thing I'd say. And then the second thing is growth has long been equated with consumption. So the more consumption there is, the more growth there is. And I think what we're seeing is that because people are starting to realize that actually it's, sustainability is about efficiency, there are different models and different ways of doing things coming into the fore where you can still achieve growth, but it's no longer you're consuming resources at the rate you were. So you're being smarter about how you use them, smarter about recycling. So everything to do with subscription and, hard assets where they're being leased at more and not bought. All of that sort of increases the lifespan of these things, which means you consume less, but you've packaged it in a way that you can still grow. So I don't think, I'm sure the lady you mentioned is far wiser than I am, but I'm not convinced that improving sustainability equates to a lack of growth or a reduction in growth. I think you can absolutely do both. You just have to think smarter and be more efficient. And I think that's sort of where we've got to as an economy now. That's the challenge that we need to meet, because for too long it's been too easy just to, dig stuff out of the ground, use it once, and then because it's slightly difficult to recycle, let's just go and dig some more. We have to sort of change that mantra and that mentality.
And how did you hit on bikes? What was the conclusion you arrived? I think this is actually, you've gone on a journey and you've gotten to a point where you go, bikes, that's what we want to do. So
going back to that efficiency point, I don't know why, I've always just loved efficient things. I find something that's really appealing to me about them. And an e-bike is the most efficient form of transport on the planet. And I was reading there's this scientific thing I was reading the other day, which really highlighted this, which is if you put the same amount of energy into all these few different vehicle modes, someone walking would be able to walk 50 meters. Someone riding a bike would be able to do about 100 meters. So by giving someone a bike, you've doubled their efficiency at movement. A car was something like 2 meters. An old diesel car was 2 meters. A new petrol car was 4 meters, and an EV was like 10 meters. And then for fun, they sort of put the e-bike on at the end, and that was like 172 meters. So an e-bike is more efficient than a bike. And that, as soon as I have found that, I was like, this is brilliant. And the reason it's more efficient is because the motor is more efficient at converting energy into motion than a body riding a bike in terms of, burning food to, produce energy to, etc. So I just thought that was amazing, and latched onto it. And then I don't know if you've ever ridden an e-bike, but once you get on one, it's just very difficult to go back to a normal bike because they are so much more fun.
Do you know what? I'm ashamed to say I haven't.
Oh, so really? Okay. Well, let's change that. Yeah.
I love to ride a bike, but I
Right.
haven't ridden an e-bike, which is really interesting. I think, so how did you get started? How do you go from, and we'll explore some of that earlier stuff in due course, but I'm interested to see how do you go about setting up an e-bike subscription business?
So I know there's this very famous book called like 0 to 1 or something like that. I've never read it, but immediately from the title, I sort of understood the premise, right? Like, you've just got to start. So the first thing I did was literally go into company's house and register a company, because I thought, like, I need to do something. And if I do that, that will create a whole set of responsibilities and, things that I can't kid myself that I need to do. And it would just get me started. So that was literally the first thing. I sort of, right, I'm done with PwC. I've got this idea. It's not fully formed by any stretch. I've got no way of funding it. I've got no contacts in it, like literally nothing. But if I register a company, I've started, and it's just gone from there. So that was, day one. Then it was starting to do a little bit of research, trying to find a co-founder.
I was going to ask you about that. How did the co-founder relation, how did that start?
Really, really serendipitously and organically. So my co-founder is a guy called David Watkins. David actually and I know each other from school. David was in the year above, but he went off to uni, and then we literally didn't talk until we sort of started having conversations about Dash. So David, off on his own thing, had sort of taken voluntary redundancy at Jaguar Land Rover, used that money to do an MBA at Imperial. And while he was doing that, they were sort of telling him, look, just network like crazy. That's what an MBA is half about. And at the same time, I was sort of starting to put onto LinkedIn what Dash was sort of becoming, or what I thought it might be. And he reached out and said, look, what you're doing sounds really interesting. Can we go for a coffee? So we went for a coffee, and then, little thing, little task, little opportunity came up here and there. And it was like, Dale, could you help on this? Would you want to help on that? And then it was just sort of, grew very gradually from that, which was fantastic, really, because it allowed both of us to sort of get into bed with one another without, actually having to commit to anything. And the fact that we knew each other from school, and we had that sort of like shared history and knew each other enough that we knew what we were like, but not so well that we couldn't be forthright with each other about what we both wanted. And, there was no sort of like friendship to lose, if that makes sense. Lucky, I'd say he's one of my closest friends now. But at the time, not being friends was actually really, really helpful, because it meant there was like brutal honesty between us.
Had you a sort of checklist of kind of skills and capabilities and values of things that you were looking for in a co-founder?
Nothing formalized. The skills, definitely. The skills is like really easy to sort of put your hat on and say that I need someone who can literally do this, because it's just a very functional, operational need for it. The softer stuff is much harder to define. And if I went back and sort of tried to do it again, I'm not sure, even knowing what I know now, I'd really be able to sort of divine that much out of that side, because the soft stuff is easy to do. This is why like interviews are so flawed, right? It's because you can easily, portray a certain persona and characteristic for an hour, but when, it all goes Pete Tong and you're in the weeds and you're, really stressed, you're really struggling, you're tired, like, how is that person going to behave? That's very, very difficult to work out. Fortunately for me, David is like an absolute metronome in the best possible way. I say that as a huge compliment. He can just keep going at the same pace no matter what's going on, whereas I'm a bit more like this, so that I can sort of pick him up when I'm on a high and when things are flying, and give him a little boost and stuff like that. But equally, when it goes down, the fact that he just continues is hugely reassuring.
Was there I'm intrigued by the reasons why you were sat there thinking, right, I've got a number of an idea for a business, but I need a co-founder. What was the thinking behind that?
I just didn't want to do it alone. Yeah. If I'm honest, I just thought this looks everyone says it's so hard. Like, why would you want to do this alone? Like, I was just thinking, like, what happens if I get ill or something like that? I mean, it's just a nightmare. Whereas if there's two of you, you immediately increase your chances of success because you can deal with like little shocks like that. So, I mean, we were talking before, and I hope you don't mind me saying, I'm currently sat here with a broken rib, broken elbow and wrist, which means typing is very difficult and things like that, basic tasks. So my efficiency is certainly not where I'd like it to be. But luckily, I've got a brilliant co-founder who can help, pick up the slack. I just think people doing it on their own, I have so much respect for. But equally, I think just make life easier for yourself and find a co-founder.
I think also it might seem a daft thing to say, but that sense of almost kind of you get kind of 1-on-1 to make 5, because actually you magnify and you accept. It doesn't make it any easier, but you've got shared. It's a lonely business. You don't need my sympathy, but it's a lonely old job, right? So you've got someone to turn to, you've got someone you can talk to, you can sense check your ideas, who'll sense check you. All of those there's so much value in it.
Completely. The decision making is probably the biggest one, to be honest. Just having someone there to talk through decisions and challenge each other saves you so much time and money. I mean, there are a number of times when I've thought this is what we need to do, and had these really detailed thoughts. I thought I've really thought about this issue holistically and I consider it from every angle. And then the number of times Dave and I've gone to talk through it, and he's just gone, well, what about this? And I thought, oh yeah, that's really good. Okay, yeah, no, right, let's do it like that. And we've, that's saved us weeks of time potentially building something, and all the money that goes with that. So yeah, definitely.
I guess if you look back to the start, what is it that you set out to achieve?
Good question. So there's definitely a part of it that was I wanted to build something and, build a business. I think lots of people have that aspiration. So I certainly had it. And also the sort of realization that I didn't want to get to partner at PwC or climb that ladder. That was sort of another nice thing to have pushing me along. I think what we set to achieve is, so we want to make a meaningful difference to the lives of all of our customers. So do something that, really that actually helps people. And I think there is a huge kick that we all get as a team from the fact that we do that. We help people switch to a more affordable form of transport, a healthier form of transport, and one that makes them feel good about, their impact on the world. And then, of course, at some point, I'm very hopeful there'll be a financial, implication for me and financial reward. Doing a startup is certainly, you can't get into it for that reason, because it doesn't happen for the beginning. Certainly, it's quite the opposite. But yeah, sure. That's something I'm very hopeful in the future.
I think if you've got, I agree with you. If you've got that compelling purpose and you're really clear about what that purpose is to be and why, and you concentrate on all those things that you consider to be important to fulfill that purpose, it's not quite so simplistic or easy to say the money's just a natural byproduct of that. But
there is an element of that, though. It's just a score metric, right? It's like playing football. If you're really good at football, you will score goals, and goals win you matches. It's like that. It's not as simplistic as that, as you say, but definitely there is. I certainly hope there is, because that's what we try and do.
And so what have been some of the challenges that you've faced along the way?
So we've had a big one recently. Which is that a courier firm has just gone into administration that we used. So, overnight we've lost access to being able to deliver deliver bikes to people. Fortunately, we sort of foresaw this when we were first doing this sort of stuff and set up some plan B. So we're now busy putting those into action. But, that's just literally happened out of the blue and very, very recently. So that's one of the sort of challenges. But thinking back to the early days, just huge ones like fundraising, having never done that, no sort of investor contacts.
Which is it? Where do you start? We'll come on to your PwC. You've got a financial background, but
which helps.
For the benefit of listeners, where do you, someone who's sat in a room somewhere right now has a number of an idea, but thinks, well, I wouldn't even know where to get started, and funding is going to be the key component to that. How do you go about it?
So, learning from my mistakes, I thought when I went into fundraising, it was all going to be about, financial models and showing that you've been really diligent and, being very realistic in your assumptions. I would say that's probably 10% of it. So the biggest part, or the biggest thing that we've learned, is about storytelling and how you communicate what your vision is. And I think anyone can do this. Right? This doesn't require you to be a financial whiz. This just work out what the story you're going to tell investors are and why that story is exciting and why it's exciting now. That's the sort of thing that we sort of realize. I was told this a bit of advice, luckily, quite early on in the journey. But yeah, working out what that story is and putting it down on paper in a way that you can present it to someone, and that takes them from never having met you to understanding you, your motivations, the business, what the opportunity is, who are the competitors, etc., and laying that all out in a coherent story is overwhelmingly the biggest success factor. And then it's just about being really damn perseverant and diligent in approach, finding out who are potential investors. And there's loads of ways you can do that now, and approaching them and just trying to get on their radar. So, it is really a numbers game. Everyone says this, but it really is. You've got to reach out to hundreds of people to get tens of responses. And out of those tens of responses, you want to get a few investors. And that's they're the sort of metrics you're working towards. So it's about, having that story really clearly defined, that you're confident presenting, and then just being diligent, trying to get in front of them, practicing it with people, and refining it. That story doesn't have to be the same.
Do you remember that first, I wouldn't clearly ask you to name names, but do you remember that first investor pitch and how you felt and what you went through as a consequence?
So the first investor I ever pitched actually has become an investor quite recently. But, I first met him about 4 years ago. So that sort of tells you the sort of time horizon that these things can take. But my first pitch to an investor, it's quite laughable now looking back. It was so formal. It was so corporate in terms of like walking through a deck and going through the numbers and all this sort of stuff. And I'm laughing as I speak, right? Because it had no bearing in reality whatsoever. Like, with hindsight, I thought at the time, right, it was really, really accurate, but it was just complete nonsense. So yeah, I learned a huge amount, but I stayed in touch with him, kept him updated, maybe once every 6 months initially, and then more often. And then, by the time that we needed to raise very recently, that person had known Dash, known me, and known my co-founder for quite a few years. And I'd sort of used him as a bit of a sounding board to like sense check ideas and talk through challenges. So you can build up these things, and you don't have to accept no as like failure. It's just not right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's sort of how we sort of that particular individual journey sort of has gone.
And how about I guess the way that this is sort of working through my mind, I guess the challenge around when you've got your idea, you've got your concept, you're polishing your presentation, but you've got huge enthusiasm, passion for what you can achieve, and you want to get going, right? So you want that first check. You want that first check. It's a natural inclination, but then balancing that off to ensure that you've investors who share your values and your vision and your behaviors, if you like, that you can learn from, that it isn't just solely about the money, but the money's so important, right? So how you balance that off as a founder must be, there is, I guess you go through that kind of, is it a moral debate mentally where you kind of go, well, that person's just promised us a check, that will be great, we can get starting, but we know they're not the right person to us. That's a difficult balance to strike, I'd imagine.
Definitely. And we've definitely had those moments where, we've walked away from money because they weren't right.
Yeah.
Fortunately, it was at a point when we didn't need it, which I'd say is always the best time to go fundraising, when you don't need it, because it gives you that flexibility and also the confidence to go into those meetings and just, say what you want to say,
interesting point,
which actually means you normally do better. But I think, we've been really, really fortunate in the way by and large, we've picked up investors is by referrals. So there's been someone that we've met who we've really got on with that may have written a small check themselves and invested, but they've then known people around them who are, more wealthy and can write bigger checks. And having that sort of that connection, and we get on really well with that person, and if they're friendly, then that's kind of them sort of vetted for us already. I think that really helps. I think looking at people for investors who have started started businesses themselves is a really good sign that they'll probably be reasonable people, because they'll know what you're going through, and they'll know how hard it is and what it takes in terms of like emotionally, time, money, etc. So they'll listen to all your enthusiasm and they'll encourage it, but at the same time, they know what it's going to take, and they'll know that actually you're gonna fail at different things, and they'll be accepting of that as just part of the journey. The people who haven't started businesses, you find them, I think they tend to be maybe a little bit less accepting, because they've not been there and done it.
I think you make a really interesting point around that sense of ultimately it's not, you're looking for a business partner, aren't you? So the decision-making process is not just about what they can bring financially to the table for you to then subsequently continue on your journey. It's they're going to be, you want people who are within reason actively involved. I guess there's a right balance between an active involvement and an interest and a participation, and respectfully not getting in the way. That's a difficult balance to strike as well.
Yeah, so I think the best investors that we have would never force themselves onto any sort of decision-making process that we have, but equally they're constantly saying, like, we're here if you want to talk and do stuff, which is like fantastic. And that's really, I think, what I value from investors. And of course, I mean, we go to some of them all the time with help and questions and things like this. You'd be stupid not to. They're people who've made, a lot of money doing what we're trying to do in essence. So, taking a leaf out of their page from time to time, very helpful.
If you, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but if you reflect back to those early days and the investment rounds, all the things you referred to, is there anything that you would do differently?
Yeah, so 100%. So I think one of the things I struggled with at the beginning of Dash was maybe courage or like confidence to go out and approach people and like really pitch my idea and be honest about the sort of scale of ambition that we have. I somehow felt it wasn't like I think I was just very nervous that they wouldn't agree with me, or they'd laugh at me, or think the concept was completely rubbish. And I was a little bit nervous about receiving that criticism or that viewpoint, because I guess I was concerned that it would just put me off, basically, right? I'd go, maybe I should listen to these people. So what I wish is that I was quicker to grasp that you just need to find some courage to like put yourself out there, and that the putting yourself out there, the more you do it, the more you'll get back, not the less. I think that's my biggest takeaway.
Was there a moment to which you'd attribute, you thought, hey, we really are onto something here? So you've got the kind of nub of idea, you've got that realization, think this can work, we can really make this work.
So I think the first big time that happened was when we signed up an NHS trust as a customer. That was by far the biggest due diligence process that we went through, by far the largest customer in terms of headcount. And it was at a stage where we were still quite small in terms of like number of team members and revenues and all that sort of stuff. I think we had a great product, and I thought we'd really thought about it and all that sort of stuff. But actually, presenting it to I think we had to go through like 4 or 5 rounds of meetings with their team, and finance, legal, HR, data, and all the rest of it. Actually getting through that process, we were like, wow, if we've managed to do that as a really small team, we've clearly got something that is valuable, and we've obviously been able to deliver it as well, which is fantastic. So I know actually we opened a bottle of champagne when that all got signed off, and I think that's the only time we've ever opened a bottle of champagne in celebration of Dash. So that's sort of maybe that's the right metric to use as to when we think we've made it.
And interesting that you should the subscription model, if you like. I mean, it's not without its challenges. Absolutely. I'm not suggesting it's easy for 1 minute, but it's also that it's a beautiful model in so much as it's got that holy grail of recurring revenue, which everybody's trying to address. And the thing that strikes me is that this may really seem like a really daft analogy or comparison to draw, but I remember when first I leased a car, and I remember a conversation with my father kind of along the lines of, well, why would you lease it? Like, what, you don't own it at the end of it, as you've got nothing to show for it. You've got nothing to show. So I definitely come from a generation where we bought stuff and kept it because you had something to show for it. And through my working life, I've seen this evolution to leasing and hiring, and the subscription type of proposition has just evolved and evolved and evolved to the extent whereby now it's just how things are. It's what we do.
Yeah.
Not for everybody, but for a lot of us, it's about. So, have you seen that? I was really intrigued. So, when I thought of a subscription model for bikes, you have to take it. I have to preface my statement by saying, like, I'm 51, so a bike was something I owned. Like you had your bike. So I grew up. You got a bike for Christmas if you were lucky. You had a bike. The idea that you might then, and it was something of which you were intensely proud. The fact that you can just rent one, which sounds brilliant, but is also, it's a mindset shift. Have you seen that kind of, do you get those sort of generational differences around how people perceive the model, or am I being very naive and sounding like a 51-year-old man as I'm talking?
No, you definitely do. So there's definitely a conversation with some people about, just explaining why subscription might be a better way for them to sort of get their bike. And actually, I think we're quite good at winning people over when you sort of go through it. So the best thing my sort of like go-to argument is, how many times have you actually sold a bike in your life? Most people, it's never, right? They just get given away, or they're scrapped, or they're left
exactly what I was going to say.
They're left in the shed, right? And
that's a really good point.
That's sort of that value that is sat in that bike, you've just lost. Whereas with that subscription, obviously that's what we're capturing every time. So it's nothing that you're losing out. It's just that we're being slightly more efficient at how we capture that value. But for you as the consumer, it means you've got like so much more flexibility. You can, you don't have to go and worry about selling your bike to fund a new one. It's just you hand back your bike that you've got currently. So let's say you've got to change the circumstances, which we deal with all the time. So someone was living in a small flat near to their office, who was riding a folding Brompton because that was perfect for them. They could put it on the tube and fold it up and put it in an apartment. It's a over £3,000 e-bike. Let's say they move out somewhere a bit further afield. They've got a bit more space, maybe a shed now or a garage. Brompton probably not the right bike for them anymore. So rather than having to worry about selling that bike to fund a new one, they can just cancel their subscription and switch to maybe a Cowboy or a Van Moof, or a bigger, more classically framed bike that's capable of doing a longer journey and more comfort, maybe really, really effortlessly. I think that's great, and there's lots of people don't really think through that until they find themselves in that situation, and then they have to go through that hassle. And undoubtedly, you selling your bike as an individual, you get far less than what it's actually worth, because there's no trust, there's no warranty behind it. You don't know, the buyer doesn't know what you've done to it, or is the battery really working properly? So I think that's where we're able to be a bit better. And
the price point struck me as well. I mean, I think I read it as cheaper than the cost of a sandwich a day, or I was actually thinking, I'd say
significantly,
significantly so. And I'd looked at it, I was thinking, actually, if I look at what I might pay for a coffee, if I'm out and about, it almost makes the cost of your proposition almost negligible in that comparison. So it's a really compelling price point, and it's a really interesting proposition. What about geographically? So am I right? I think, where are you now? So is it just London? Where we're
national. So as long as you're not in Ireland, the Isles, or the Highlands, we can get you your bike, we can service it, etc. So that was actually quite a recent expansion.
Fantastic.
One that was a long, long time in the making, as I'm sure you can imagine. It's easy. Doing it in London, a relatively small area, is one thing. Expanding it across the country takes a whole other, set of skills and contacts and capabilities, etc. So, we're now, anywhere basically.
Fantastic. The kind of market dynamics, I'd imagine, my sense is, back to what we talked about right at the beginning around sustainability and climate, and also I think you can extend that into, the health implications and, all of the other, the benefits sell themselves. It makes perfect sense. But is there I'd imagine that as a market, the expansive nature of the market opportunities just getting, as people kind of waking up more and more, my sense is, to these sorts of opportunities, it only affords even more opportunity for you.
Completely. So I think looking at just cyclist behavior, so one of the biggest blockers to someone being a cyclist is fear of cycling on the roads. That is the number one reason that we get why people won't cycle, particularly in cities. But helpfully, the more and more people that try, the more and more people know someone closely who does cycle to work, and they can see the sort of impact it has on their lives as like a reference point, as like a trust mark of, okay, this is doing it. If Steve down the road is doing it, I absolutely should be. So I think that just like as a small sort of microcosm of what's happening, I think is really, really helpful. But then played out across the entire industry, e-bike growth, is going through the roof. The cycling market's going through a little bit of a wobble at the moment because of the sort of impact that the sort of pandemic had in terms of bringing a lot of buying forward for people. And then there's been this sort of minor wobble over the bike market, currently, just as people sort of adjust to, I think a lot of people, I don't know if you've seen a few bike distributors that went bust recently, and that there has been some challenge in the industry. But if you look at the trend and it's been e-bikes within that, it's really exciting and really encouraging.
I thought I was going to ask you about that, about the pandemic, because one of the things that struck me anecdotally, but not factually, I don't have the evidence to back it up, but anecdotally, what I saw was, what I felt I was seeing was that people became very much more aware of the impact that exercise could have on their health.
Yeah.
I think is my sense. And how that would play out is that you would see more people out walking, out running, out riding bikes. You just saw more people outside. Now, my sense is that there's, we've slightly drifted back into some of those. We've all got back in our cars again.
Yeah.
There's an element of that. But I do feel like there's been an overhang of that. I sense that more and more discussions around our health and how we look after ourselves are prevailing. Is that a fair analysis to your point as well? People may have bought bikes through the pandemic. That means they're not buying bikes again now because they've got what they need. But
yeah,
I guess that then when it comes to the subscription model comes into play, right? So you can change your bike. You don't have to necessarily go out and buy a new one. You've got that subscription offer.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's what I was trying to get at, is that basically you had this enormous spike of demand through COVID. And I think a lot of people sort of assumed that was just going to continue.
Yeah.
And unfortunately it didn't, because what in actual fact happened is that maybe a load of people that probably would have bought a bike 2 or 3 years down the line actually just thought, I'm going to get mine now because I'm going to get a load of use out of it, because we've all got a year off because of, furlough and whatnot. But I definitely think that the sort of health thing has stayed the course through the pandemic. I think you're right. Like my own personal experience during COVID, I went running far more than I ever have in my lifetime. I think I went for a run every day pretty much. I don't do that anymore. So, to your point, it has probably dipped, but I still do it more than I did before. And I think that's probably true of a lot of people, and certainly something that's helpful and beneficial for us as a business trying to get more people cycling.
Well, let's find out a bit more about you. So I definitely want to come back to Dash, but I'm keen to find out a bit more of the story behind the story, if you like, from your own perspective. So let's have a look at, so where did you grow up? Well, you mentioned obviously your co-founder and you went to the same school, but so what part of the world did you grow up in, and what therefore was childhood like for you?
So I grew up near Henley-on-Thames, so just outside London. I think I had a very happy childhood. I was very fortunate in that the house I grew up in, we had a big garden and fields and all that sort of stuff. So I spent pretty much all my childhood outside. We would, like me and my brother and friends, would sort of meet up and we'd dig First World War trenches. That was our pastime.
Yeah.
So like literally shovels in the ground, digging this 20-meter long ditch, as far as anyone else was concerned. But for us, it was, our sort of like base and things. We spent hours and hours doing that. Yes, it's very happy, like outside. It was a lovely part of the world to grow up.
And what sort of things were you into as a kid? What were the pursuits, the hobbies, the interests? When you weren't digging trenches?
Yeah, so when we weren't digging trenches, playing football. Yeah, played a lot of football. Wasn't particularly that good, but very enthusiastic. I think normal stuff. I don't think I had There's no sort of swimming would have been my big thing, actually. Did a lot of swimming as a child competitively, which was, I sort of stopped when I was maybe like 12 or 13 because it takes up so much time. But yeah, I used to swim all over the place in races and things like that.
And was there a point at which you started to first take a bit of an interest in business? And if so, what might that be?
Definitely. So I bought a computer when I was maybe like 14, I think. I had my first computer. And there was I got given this game on this computer, which was, I can't remember what it's called now, but you basically had to build a business, right? And it was like literally you had to source where you were getting raw materials from, combine them and sell them and all this sort of stuff. And, I was just a child, right? I didn't really know much about it or think about what it was actually teaching you, but it taught you all the fundamentals of business, like, economies of scale and marketing and sales and like organizing stuff. And it was all going back as a theme here, like all about efficiency, and that just immediately, I was hooked on that for a long time. So I think that was probably the first time that I thought business was quite interesting. And then the next time would be when I got my first job at, 16 and started getting actually, proper money being paid into my pocket every week and what you could do with that money. I was sort of hooked from then, really.
I'm assuming, Peter, you pursued career as an accountant first and foremost. Is that right?
Yeah.
Or did you go into... Yeah. So why? What was the appeal of an accounting career from the outset? What was it that caught your attention?
So I was at uni doing economics, and I thought, I think maybe slightly generous to say, I thought my mother thought I should go and get an internship. So I thought it. And then I basically got two different offers, or two different routes. One was investment banking and one was sort of big four, professional audit firms. And I was given some advice that, do not go to an investment bank. They will chew you up and eat you alive. And, you'll be on this treadmill forevermore. So I thought, let's stay away from that. But the real appeal of going to PwC or that sort of world was I wanted to just learn about business. And I thought learning from a financial sense was probably one of the best ways to get under the hood and really understand how businesses work. And going to somewhere like PwC where you've got, massive FTSE 100 businesses all the way down to sort of high growth startups and everything in between was a really interesting prospect for me. I just thought I'm just going to get to learn so much. So that was the sort of mindset that I went into it. And I literally remember speaking to my dad saying, I want to go into this for, maybe 3 to 5 years. And I want to come out and I want to literally know everything. I definitely didn't know everything coming out of it, but I knew a hell of a lot more than I did going in.
What do you feel you gained from the experience?
So all the stuff that you'd expect around like financial discipline, forecasting, understanding how to set up processes and, accounting for one. But a lot of the softer stuff around how to handle like difficult client relationships, how to sell to clients, how to manage a team, organize your team, motivate them, deal with things when they're not going right, like stress and time management, definitely two skill sets that I think I'm probably a bit better at than most. Just having had you're forced to sort of learn those skill sets if you want to succeed, because if you don't, you just get burnt out, which I saw, lots of people go through. And then, I think confidence, definitely. You get put in front of clients very quickly. Literally within you sort of do 2 weeks of training at these places, and then you are out in front of clients being, I think my charge out rate was like £150 an hour. Whether I was worth £150 an hour, I'm not so sure. But that's certainly in the back of my mind, right? So you just have to sort of become confident and trying to be professional and all that sort of stuff. And I think that was a really good education to go through at a very formative point in my career.
I think it was a great foundation. And to your point, and I'm interested in, therefore, you look at the combination of skill sets that you and your co-founder would enjoy. I think you made mention you did an MBA, right?
Yep.
So you've got there's a formality of training that both of you will have enjoyed, but then also now you get some very real practical experiences as well. You combine those two and it gets to become a really powerful proposition from a leadership perspective. You combine those with the softer skills as well, and you're absolutely onto something.
Let's hope so.
So coming back to Dash, what is a typical day like for you? Just get a sense of what life is like. Is there a typical day? And if so, how does that play out?
So there's definitely 80% of the day that is pretty typical. And then you've got the 20% where you're fighting fires, or you're doing something exciting, like this, or something a bit different. So I think what we do quite well between me and my co-founders, we're quite clear on who does what. So I look after sales, finance, fundraising, investor relations, and all that sort of stuff. So my day, if it's a good day, is normally jam-packed with sales calls and taking through, prospective companies through our platform, explaining what we do and stuff like that. It's, looking at what the marketing is doing and how the metrics on that performing, trying to understand, from the funnel that takes someone landing on our webpage all the way to ultimately someone getting a bike, how is that stacking up, and how can where's the sort of worst performing point that we need to focus on? That is really that sort of stuff. It's, it's about, I think it's just there's nothing that exciting that goes on or magical. It's just being diligent about sticking to these tasks and then dealing with the other stuff, the 20%, as it comes up.
You make a really interesting point. I think what you describe in many ways is business, isn't it? It's actually that there is an element of persistence and repetition of task and getting better, sharpening the saw, cliche, but actually getting better and better and better at those tasks on a daily basis. But to your point, being a founder, you're always going to get that off curve ball. You mentioned your distributor going into administration. You're always going to get something that's your day's off on one path and then something will deviate, and that's what it looks like. But it's demanding, right? So you don't need me to point that out. It's an obvious thing to say. How do you escape those demands? Do you how do you unwind? Do you get an opportunity to relax? And if so, how do you spend your time?
So 100%. So big runner. So that do a lot of running. I'm very fortunate to live very close to Richmond Park in London. So I'll often go be doing laps of that, which is great fun. Fortunate that my family's got a small cottage up in North Wales, which is near the beach. So during summer, we'll go up there and switch off. And that's actually probably the place that I switch off the most. Outside of there, I can be doing something, whether it be running or whatever, and the sort of in the quiet of my mind, it still reverts back to business and ideas.
Because I think that's one thing that perhaps do people underestimate it. That may be a little unfair, but in reality, even if you're not physically at a desk doing what we might determine or recognize as work, you're always working, right? That is a challenge, even if it's the thought processes that are, dealing with an issue, whatever it might be. That switching that off is, I would argue, almost impossible.
It's very difficult. I was going to say, going to the cottage in Wales is probably the one place that I get to and I immediately switch off. I don't know what it is about. I mean, it's not a very special cottage. I mean, Mum, if you're listening, it's lovely. But it's just nothing much to look at, but it's full of all our old family furniture and things like that. So there's just this really lovely sense of nostalgia of childhood and stuff like that. And maybe, I don't know if there's something to do with that just helps me sort of immediately switch off. But even going on holiday, the first 3 days, I'm still sort of in work mode, thinking about what's going on, what are the challenges, what do we need to do, and all that sort of stuff. So you're right. It's very difficult to switch that side off, but I absolutely love it. But I don't, I'm only thinking about it. I don't think about it out of a worry. I don't think it's more of an excitement and ambition. Sort of, they're the emotions that I feel about it.
I think if you're loving what you're doing, it doesn't become intrusive, does it? It doesn't become an as I say, is the right word, intrusive element to your day. It becomes about, actually, I'm excited by what, and that comes through. That very much comes across from what you describe. So I guess, therefore, if you're looking at what the future looks like for Dash Ride, what excites you about that future?
So we're getting a lot better at convincing non-cyclists. So that's, I think, if we continue to do that and the sort of impact that will end up having, I think is really exciting. But also we're starting to be, we've gone through that phase as a startup where you are a bit of an unknown commodity. It's a bit of a risk going with you, to the point now where we've got some really large businesses on our books as customers that we serve very, very happily for an long period of time now. That's enabling us to sort of attract new customers who are huge brands. And, the fact that we've in our pipeline, we've got, I won't say name names, but if I were to look at it and the brands that are there, and if you asked me like even a year ago, like, do you think you could get any of these companies? I mean, absolutely not. But now, they're all there, all speaking incredibly positively about us. So I'm really, really excited to sort of spread out our impact and make more of it, get more people on bikes, all that sort of stuff, growing the team because we'll have to. So it's becoming like a real business now.
And are you seeing, from an infrastructure perspective, from a governmental level, whether that's nationally, locally, are you seeing there's more that sort of proliferation of cycling schemes, cycle paths? Are you seeing, is that happening? We sort of, again, intuitively get a sense that it might be, but probably not fast enough. But is that something that we are investing in, or that we needed to be doing more of?
Yeah, so there was a huge promise about 2 years ago with a massive walking and cycling fund announced that was going to do this, and bit by bit it's been curtailed,
right?
Which is disappointing. I think the reality is, though, being a cyclist around London, that there's more people get hung up on the cycling infrastructure than they necessarily need to. What we need to do is try and encourage people to change their mindset. And I understand that putting loads of designated cycle paths does help with that, but I don't think it's a very, very expensive way of doing it. I think what we need to try and do is get more people onto bikes, because that will, de facto, get less cars on the road, and sort of help the situation that way. So there is stuff going on, and I think it's good. Probably there should be a bit more of it, but I don't think it's going to be a silver bullet. So there's other things that we need to be doing.
One of the things I see, if we look at the impact of hybrid working, this sense of, I think there are so many organisations, some dealing with it very well, some feeling less so, but everybody's wrestling with this idea of what work is. So for the longest time, it's been a place you go and something you do for most people, or for a lot of people, for the majority of people. But increasingly, that's changing. That's certainly evolving. The genie's out the bottle with respect to the ability to work from home, the technology it affords. Is that having an effect? And if so, how is that affecting how organisations are thinking about the sorts of propositions that the like of which a Dash Rides can offer, or indeed even the individual is thinking, well, I need to ride to work because I work from home, right? How's that? How are you seeing that impacting?
So I think they're very different questions. So the employer question, I think we've not come full circle, but we've certainly closer to where we started than where we were. And I think anecdotally we speak to HR managers all the time. And I think the majority of companies are starting to realize that having everyone together frequently, there is real value in it. And in some of the ways, the value that is coming out is quite interesting, actually. So one of the things I was told quite recently, based on your industry, you'll probably know this, but like, not having people together and not building relationships where they're sort of, you're physically with people, the relationships you build are far less or far lower quality
100%
than if you do remotely. And how that is sort of being flown through is that then when someone offers you more money to go to a different employer, there's not that same barrier of, I'm going to lose all the people that I worked with. And do you know what, actually, for an extra 2,000 or 3,000 a year, that's not worth it to me. Whereas now, because people aren't so well connected, those barriers are being eroded. So businesses are starting to see that in the sort of the great resignation, it was called, and all this sort of stuff.
I can see that, and I see that every day. I think the there's a number of things that strike me. How you build, this is butcher human psychology now, but we're all inherently, we want to feel like we're part of something, that there's a sense of belonging, and that we're doing something, not for everybody, and it will in varying degrees, but broadly speaking, my sense is whether that's work or other things we do, we all like to feel like we're part of something and we're making a contribution. And that's how we, and we derive satisfaction and good feeling from that. And how you do that from behind a screen, how you build shared purpose. And you talked about the values and purpose that you've got with it, you enjoy within Dash, how you build that when you're not collectively together, cohesively together, feeling like you're part of it, I think is one thing. The other thing, the thing that strikes me as well is that you're also the opportunity cost for people and business as a consequence of, just being around someone, just hearing something, a little, a comment, a conversation, a throwaway line. Yeah, we used to refer to it as the kind of the water cooler chat, but that can spark off a whole series of initiatives or opportunities or prospects or whatever it might be, problem solving. All sorts of things derive from that we can't arguably quite measure, but I feel like we might be losing. And I think it's really easy for someone like me who's, been working for 30 years, who's got a network, who's got people I can go speak to, go talk to. If you're just coming into the workplace, and also that as well, I think, away from the formality of training, so forget the training courses, but the informal learning that you will have enjoyed when you first joined PwC. So how to behave, how to interact, how to communicate, how to engage, how to participate, good and bad.
How to dress.
Dress.
Right, like really, really basic stuff. So,
absolutely. It was really interesting. I had someone say this to me the other day, actually, that, about meetings, about being on time for meetings. So being on time for meetings, this particular individual was venting, but being on time for meetings, right? So if the meeting's at 10, when we're online and we're doing it via Teams or whatever mechanism we might be using, right? At 1 minute to 10, I can rock up, pick up a screen and go, hey, but in an office, a meeting starts at 10. I need to be there by 5:02, right, at the very latest, because I don't, I need to have gone and grabbed my coffee, grabbed my notepad, grabbed my notes, whatever it might be, been to the bathroom, whatever it might be. I need to have done all that before I get there. I can't, because that's just about being polite and professional and all those kind of courteous to your colleagues, respectful. And he was frustrated. He's finding he put it down to this, since because you go, oh, I need to flick up my laptop because I've got a meeting. No, you might have a 10-minute walk or a 5-minute walk to the meeting room. You need to be able to do that. So I think there's all this kind of unlearned behaviour. I mean, they're all solvable, but I see all of this kind of changing dynamics in terms of how organisations are affecting the way we engage in the workplace and how as employees we behave. I think it's a really, really fascinating time to be alive in that respect.
Yeah. Lots of opportunities if you can get it right, but some big challenges to solve to do that.
Sorry, I went off on a rant then, but it's something I'm seeing all the time.
Yeah, I bet. And I personally, I can't work remotely. I love being around other people. I like shamelessly eavesdropping on conversations, right? To just hear what people are thinking and how things are going and what's going on. Because, going back to that point I sort of making about me and my co-founder, talking through ideas and challenging each other. Sometimes you don't realize you're having an idea. And it's only when someone hears you going, oh, you're thinking about doing it like that. Have you not thought about it like this? If we were remote, that would just never happen.
I also think it's how you manage or how you make people feel part of something. So I think with the very best of intentions whether you're managing, leading, whatever it might be, if you've got, 30 people on a screen, right? If you've got 30 people in a room and you're presenting something, you intuitively know, because you'll have different types of, behavioural profiles and individuals, inevitably in any organisation. You'll have some who make a lot of noise, people like me, who like to stand up and ask questions and, when I'm in the room. And you get those people who are arguably even of greater value, but they're more reflective. They'll sit back, they'll think. And you want to know but they might be shy. There might be a million and one different reasons why they don't feel comfortable in voicing that view in the room. But because you've gotten to know them, by their body language, there's something they're not quite comfortable with, or there's something they want to say, but they're too shy to say it, whatever it might be. You pick up on all those non-verbal cues that with the very greatest of intentions, if you've got 30 people on a screen, is nigh impossible to be able to achieve. But actually, if they're in a room, you'll know that something's up with Mary. Or maybe she's not feeling it today. I'm just going to check in with her and check she's okay. Whatever it might be. You can do that when you're with people in a way that I would argue, you don't appear to be able to do quite so effectively virtually.
I agree. I agree.
Anyway, I'm off on a rant again. So I'm not trying not to get angry, but what makes you angry, Jamie? What frustrates you? What gets you upset?
Oh gosh, good question. Losing money, not unnecessarily. So just not having thought through something.
efficiency again? There's that efficiency thing.
A
being
little,
efficient.
yeah, maybe. Yeah, that really, I find that really difficult. Poor timekeeping, that annoys me. Other than that, I'm pretty relaxed. They're my two things. Everything else is just, we've just got to deal with it. I get upset all the time, but angry is, I think, different. Yeah, there's not much that really angers me.
So what about influencers? Who's been the greatest influence on your career to date, and why?
So, biggest influence I would say is my family. So I'm very, very fortunate that my brother, my stepfather, my uncle, my dad to an extent, have all had businesses or have businesses, all started their own business. And I think having that as a sort of just not the right word to say status quo, but just, that's like, it's completely normal to have a business, I think is very liberating when you're trying to start your own, because you just don't maybe see it as such a big thing as maybe, I don't know, other people do. But also it means that you've got people to pick up the phone to and ask, how would you deal with this? Or how did you get over this hurdle? Or is it really this hard? Like, is it just going really wrong for me? So I'd say that they're definitely the people who've had the biggest influence on me, because probably if that wasn't so normal, having your own business, it wouldn't have been maybe necessarily that big an aspiration of mine. But outside of that, I mean, I don't have like necessarily like some people have like business heroes and things like that. There aren't like individuals that I sort of think, oh gosh, what an amazing individual. There are traits or aspects of people that I think are really admirable, and like I will try and imitate to some extent. But I don't have like a list of names per se.
So what drives you?
I have no idea how to even begin to answer that. How do I answer that? I think what drives me is I don't know how to do something to less than like the best I can do it. I've really, really struggled to do things by halves or not do my best at. What underlies that? I have no idea how you unpick that, but I think that basic sort of inability to not do my best just sort of inevitably pushes me to try and do everything as well as I can. I don't know if that's what you were looking for, but I think that's sort
Absolutely.
of how I feel.
So what does success mean to you?
I think as humbly as I can put this, I say I'm quite very happy. I say relatively successful now. Like, I think we've done a hell of a lot in the business. I'm happily married. I'm healthy. I'm very happy with my life. Like, genuinely very, very happy. Like, sure, it would be nice if Dash was bigger, and I think I will get a huge amount of satisfaction from growing it and watching it. But will I sort of go from this moment where I wasn't successful to I am successful? I don't think so. I think I just want to sort of continue on the path I'm on, and if I manage to stay that course, I will definitely consider that as continuation of success. But I don't see it as like this sort of defining moment or this sort of trophy that's handed out at the end of something. It's it's far more continuous than that.
I think that's incredibly wise, and I think arguably what greater success than happiness, which very much comes across. Absolutely. So looking back, what advice might you give, therefore, particularly given what you've just said? What advice would you give your 21-year-old self?
I think it's something I sort of alluded to earlier, which is that I've got this new mantra which I try and live by, which is 30 seconds of courage. So I think any big decision you make in life boils down to having like literally just 30 seconds of courage to start. And I think for me, that makes any decision or sort of, challenge really, really achievable and sort of easy, because it's just, you've just got to start, because once you start, you'll continue and you'll just get to where you want to be. And I find it, very, very liberating. And I wish I had that sort of little technique earlier on in my life to sort of, not be so afraid, not be so shy about, being ambitious or putting my hand up for opportunities or trying things that I might fail at. I think, that's probably what I would wish I could have taught myself way before 21, but certainly at 21.
That's a wonderful point on which to end. But before we do so, I'd want to give people an opportunity to find out more about Dash Rides. Where should they go? Where should we point them?
So love you for all to come visit us at dashrides.com. Have a look around, get in touch. You can book a little call with any of us on the team, and we'd very happily answer any questions. It doesn't cost you anything as an employer to sign up and offer, fantastic benefits to your staff. And we'd be happy to have any company of any size.
Fantastic. Well, I'm very conscious as to your point around when I asked the question around things that might make you angry or upset you. Timekeeping was one. I've overran, so we really should wrap this up. But really appreciate your time. It's a fascinating insight. I think it's a wonderful proposition, and I think it's one that clearly benefits. There are so many benefits above and beyond the financial benefits. I think so many benefits to getting all of us on our bikes and out of our cars, particularly given as I spent 8.5 hours in a car last week on a journey that should have taken me the best part of 3 or 4. So yeah, I'd do anything to get off the road. But so Dash Rides, wonderful business. Jamie Milroy, you've been a great guest today, wonderful guest. Really appreciate your time, and look forward to watching you and your colleagues continue to flourish and thrive.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure being on.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening to today's Extrology podcast. I really appreciate your audience and ears. If you've enjoyed it, then why not hop onto iTunes and give us a review? I'd really appreciate anything that you might have to say. Any feedback always gratefully received, and look forward to hosting you next time. See you soon. Just a reminder, today's podcast is brought to you by Progresso Talent Partners. Visit www.progressotalent.com today for more information.